Hello and welcome to Your Employment Matters. I'm Beverly Williams and I'm here to help you navigate your career. This is for anyone who's searching for their dream job or promotion, or perhaps you're just looking to hang on to the job you have. Today's work environments are multi-generational, multi-religious, multinational, multiracial, and multi-gender identity. Add market disruptors like Amazon and Lyft, along with the addition of AI, and it's easy to see why finding and keeping a job is such a challenge. Employment success and even employment survival depend on your ability to adapt. That's why my goal for this 30-minute podcast is to first advocate embracing change and differences, and second, to encourage you to proactively assume responsibility for your career. Get your work week off to a good start by listening to Your Employment Matters every Monday. Find out how to own your career and get the best practices for making your employment matter. Hello, it's me again. It's Beverly Williams, and this is Your Employment Matters. My guest today is Terry Isner. Now, let me set the stage. Terry is someone I met at a conference last year. I attended the conference. The conference had different sessions. You sign up for sessions in advance, and I was in Terry's session. But I wasn't supposed to be there. That's not the session I signed up for. But I sat there because something he said intrigued me and resonated with me. And even though I can't tell you what it was, now I can't tell you what it was, I felt like he was talking to me. I felt that there was a connection between us that I didn't expect, and that I had wandered into his session, not by happenstance, but seriously by divine intervention. Now, whether you believe in that or not, I'm telling you, given what he was talking about, the topic was not one that would have drawn me. It would not have drawn me in. So, for a decade, as I've told you any number of times, I've been working to try to help people become more successful on their employment journey in their careers, their chosen careers. I'm trying to identify corporate donors who will buy my book, Your GPS to Employment Success, How to Find and Succeed in the Right Job, and donate books to underserved communities. My contribution, which I'll go into later, because I try to create win-wins, but I want to introduce you to Terry Isner, who's a marketing strategist and expert. And as I said, as he continued his presentation, I felt a connection, and you may too, because whatever your employment journey is, whether you want to be a CEO, an entrepreneur, a plumber, a cosmetician, a hairdresser, whatever it is you want to do, whatever it is you plan to do to earn a living, to take care of yourself, you are the product. You need to market yourself so that you will be successful. And Terry's message may help you. It helped me. Terry, welcome. And why don't you tell the listeners a little about yourself without me going through your bio?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And everything that you just told to the audience about how we connected was exactly what you told me the minute I walked off the stage, and we sat and talked for another 15, 20 minutes. And I love the idea that somebody was brought to my session without even thinking that that was the session they were going to go to. So I appreciate you setting that stage, because that was one of the, I think, most special parts of me connecting with you and of course with others at the conference, but with you in particular. I have been a marketer and a creative communicator, oh gosh, for almost 3 decades now. Yikes. And I started off as a creative director and art director in the Washington, D.C. area. And my path led me to law firms and lawyers. And as I was on my way through that journey, I literally thought that I was going to destroy my career as an art director, as how could you be creative with lawyers? And, how interesting would that be? And wow, it completely set the course for many, many years, over 2 decades in legal marketing. And I entered into legal marketing just about the time the Supreme Court gave the nod to lawyers and law firms that they were allowed to market themselves. And at the same time that I was starting to enter into that, again, as a creative director, as a creative person doing advertising, branding, a gentleman by the name of Jaffee started legal PR and legal marketing instantly again at that time frame when the Supreme Court allowed it. Our paths crossed. I actually joined the firm after he left the firm to start Jaffee, the company that I now currently own. Several years later, I ran into him again and was going to hire his agency to help me at the law firm I was working at. But instead, I asked if he was hiring, and he was. And they were a virtual agency. We are a virtual agency, and we've been a virtual agency for over 32, 33 years. So we were pretty cutting edge at the idea of creating a different work dynamic. Unfortunately, Jay passed away about 15 years ago, and I bought the agency with 2 business partners, 2 women that I had already been working with. And we took over as the managing partners and then CEOs and owners of Jaffee. We've been running that agency now for, again, about 12, 15 years. And we have increased our service offerings, doubled our service offering, doubled our employees. And it has been a really amazing ride for me. But what really changed, Beverly, was from being the creative director and having a creative sense about anything that I needed to solve for clients. I started to really focus a bit more on the people, the human dynamic, the human relationship. Now that I had employees, now that I had a staff, now that I had a team, I have 3 children, but now I have 22 more. And I don't mean that as an insult.
No.
I mean that I have a responsibility.
Exactly.
And so this is kind of the course for me because I had to reset what mattered to me. I got a new soapbox, and that soapbox became empathy in business, creating a dynamic in which one brought their whole self to work, the positive and related to the profit growth, et cetera, by doing so. And really just turning my focus to how we could be better leaders and how we could really help others rise and reach the goals that they wanted to reach. And in doing so, I found us to be so much more productive and so much more attractive as an agency. And that's when I began to start taking it on the road. And you and I met at my conference called Designing the Ultimate Law Firm.
And as I said, our journeys are different. I'm not trying to start my own law firm. So that wouldn't have been a session that would ordinarily have appealed to me. And as far as branding is concerned, after all these years of practice, both as an attorney and as a professional, I guess an HR professional, I've already have a brand. And trust me, it's not to everyone's liking, shall we say.
I'm not for everyone, and that's okay.
But anyone who knows me and who's worked with me knows that I am who I say I am. I do what I say I'm going to do. I'm where I'm supposed to be, when I'm supposed to be, and I deliver. And you can't push me around. That's important. You have to, as an employee, conduct yourself in a fashion that commands respect. You earn it by your conduct. And if you don't behave in a way that generates that kind of opinion of yourself, you have a damaged brand. And that's not good for you.
That's absolutely right. And it's really interesting because you talk about that from a behavioral point of view. And when we talk about building cultures or the importance of a business culture, whether it's a law firm or whether it's a B2B, it doesn't really matter. The culture itself is nothing more than a set of behaviors that's expected from that agency or from that business. And so we have to then look back to ourselves and say, who am I? What do I stand for? How do I bring my whole self? How do you get the authentic me in a culture that maybe is not right for me? And I think a lot of that now is really opening our eyes up to, are we creating cultures and attracting the right people? And am I the right person in a culture that I'm in? And so a lot of the idea of what I've been talking about, and I think what started to resonate more with you, wasn't the fact that you needed to design the ultimate law firm. It was starting to realize if there was the need to adapt, make some changes, because culturally and socially, I think we were all put into this business philosophy of the 80s and 90s still, of the Industrial Revolution, which we had talked about that day. That was a very different dynamic in the way that leadership expected employees to work, and to succeed, as you said, and the behaviors, et cetera. But the boardroom speak was all about profit. It was about accountability. It was about replaceabilities. And it was a very different world. And along came COVID. In my mind, it shifted everything for us out of this mindset of the Industrial Revolution that was created by one very big generation. And now we're just in a different place. We're in this kind of human revolution where we as people want to bring our whole selves to work. And we as leaders want to find ways in which we better create areas for innovation and collaboration. And I think that started this idea of a shift in what we were talking about, and wondering if that's, some of the area which you started to resonate and connect with what we talked about that day.
Fortunately for me, I wrote my book during COVID. And I don't have any biological children, but I have about a dozen or so godchildren. So I listen to what they say, their perspectives, and I know you're right. There is a shift, but I'm not so sure that everyone understands how to move forward, because there are some individuals, leaders, employers who may be entrenched in doing the things the way they used to do it, and some employees, less experienced employees, who are not committed to working the hours that may be necessary or expected. They're not used to getting negative feedback. It's that everyone gets a trophy for participation. How does that work? And one of the things I do, and I started when I started writing the book, was watching ESPN and sports analyst shows. And I realized that the athletes coming in to the NFL, especially, they were not having, they weren't used to being shouted at. They weren't used to being told what you've got to do and wait, in a certain way. And I thought to myself, that's going to be a problem, because they also want to win. And if you want to win, there are certain sacrifices that you have to make in terms of time on tasks and preparation, sacrificing time that you might want to spend playing games if you're a gamer, or just hanging out with your buddies. You have to practice more. I don't know, and I've seen it come to fruition. Some of the highly touted athletes that were drafted early haven't panned out. They don't have the skill set. And a lot of us, we're not innately talented, but we work hard to enhance what we've got. I'm a hard worker. I will work until the last dog dies. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? I have to get it
Mm-hmm.
right. I want to do it right. That's my commitment to myself. And everyone's not prepared to do that.
It's interesting because I think that's an interesting segue. We look at it through the lens of generational divide, and you start to really see a difference in everything that you've just described within the 5 generations that are in our workforce at the
Exactly.
moment. So you describe very much that of the philosophies of the Industrial Revolution, what we grew up under, what we knew, how you went to work, what was expected you from work. Those dynamics are very different for 2 generations, especially, and our 2 youngest generations. Very different dynamic. I have 3 children. The 3 of them are millennials. And even when I speak to them about their careers and their jobs and the work that they're doing, there's that sense of, wow, you're a millennial. I mean, you're exactly the description that is described. No different than Gen Z, no different than Gen X, no different than the boomers. Everybody fits beautifully in the description of who they are. And the work ethics are extremely different. And not only the work ethics, but then technology and other things that have come along that have really changed these dynamics so much. It's really hard to adapt to all of them, right? And as leaders, how should we even be expected to have to adapt to all of them? But I think the dynamic in that is it's not as much as following protocols, following procedures, following expectations, and therefore we have success. It's a lot more now about being a bit more in tune and understanding those generations, understanding the tools that they use, understanding the tools that they might need, understanding the dynamics that get them to get out of bed each day and go to work. And you do have to start to adapt in ways in which your culture, your brand begins to create opportunity for a greater mass. And that's hard because a lot of leaders look at their senior leadership. But their senior leadership sometimes is very much out of touch, especially with a lot of the social things that are happening in the world today. And the newer generations are led a lot based on these social activities, these social events, these social groups, and these social causes. And so there's very different dynamics that wake us up and get us out of bed each day, and very different dynamics, including, I think, compensation structures, workplace dynamics, work balance, and life balance. All of those things start to come into play when you start to thinking of offering somebody a job and what does that compensation package look like? And some of it isn't just dollar driven. It is other elements which they find greater value to. And if you're not willing to offer those, then a lot of times we start to lose some really, I think, talented people.
But even within my demographic, there's a difference in how, depends on where you work. It depends on whether you're working for a public entity, a private entity, a nonprofit entity. I mean, working in a law
Absolutely.
firm, you have clients, you have deadlines that have to be met. You have teams of attorneys working on projects. And if you have to stay until the next day to get that filed on time, you have to meet that deadline. I know from experience, my friends didn't understand that. They didn't understand the hours that I worked. My family didn't understand it. The guys I dated didn't understand it. But that was what was required, and I was responsible for a team, and you had to get it done. But my friends that worked for public entities, my friends that worked in nonprofits, They didn't have the same kind of work schedule. And if my college friends made plans for the weekend and I had a brief due on Monday, guess what? I wasn't there. And they didn't understand that. So it's not just it's intra demographical, and
Yep.
it's also, and that's for each demographic. And I'm going to tell you something else. I was involved in a meeting just recently, last week. There's resentment on both sides. There were attorneys in the group, senior attorneys, who resented and told the millennials present because it was a multi generational discussion. And I'm sitting there remotely. Some of them were in the location where the live discussion was taking place, but I was remote. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I hope they don't kill each other. It's like, this is what you think, and you don't know how to do it, and you're not paying attention, and the other side is like, why do we have to do it the way you want to do it? It's another way to do it. And I'm thinking to myself, it's all about in how you approach it. Tone is important. Sitting down and being, to your point, you used the word before, collaborative, establishing win-wins. This is how we did it. This is how I did it. How do you suggest that we do it? This is what we need to arrive at. This is the goal. This is the destination. How do we get there?
Yeah, but listen, I've watched the exact same things happen. And as a leader, I was just going through my group of people and the different age brackets, all the way down to the young 30s and all the way up to the mid 60s. And so within that range, and because we are a virtual agency, discipline and passion and pride seem to be part of the formula that determines success and failure when it comes to working at our agency. If you don't have the discipline to either go to the office every day and do what it takes to get it done, or go upstairs to your office in your house and work as long as you need to, however you need to get it done, you're setting yourself up for failure already. You don't have the discipline. If you don't have the discipline, okay, then maybe you have the passion, and then you learn the discipline through culture and behavior and working with others.
That's if you're
passion,
if you're willing, because you may not feel that you should have to.
And that's that compromise, right? That's where collaboration comes in. And that's where I think some generations understand compromise, understand the value of compromise, which is an extremely valuable social tool as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's how collaboration works. That's how innovation works. When we compromise, when we listen, when we build off of each other's ideas. But there's these lines that are drawn. These lines, these attitudes, these expectations, this looking down your nose at another group because another group was not brought up the way you were brought up, did not have those worth ethics put upon us or those expectations. They are very different. And we are forcing a square into a round hole. We're trying to do this because many folks are unwilling to change themselves and adapt. My way or the highway, period. Well, that my way or the highway, I have heard in all 5 generations.
Absolutely.
And so everybody seems to have this same attitude. So if we all understand that attitude, how can we not make that shift? Why can't we make the shift together to compromise, to finding what works best, which means sometimes you take the ego, you set it up on the shelf, you listen, you adapt, you innovate, you succeed.
And
they're not willing to do that in many cases.
Have reasonable expectations. Everybody's expectations are not reasonable. One of my friends, we used to work for a law firm together. She's working in another situation now. And she says a person who worked hired the same day as she said if they didn't promote her in 6 months, she was going to leave. And so my friend said, but didn't you start when I started? And she said, yes. And she says, and you think you deserve a promotion after 6 months? And she said, yes.
Yes.
And that was her expectation. I think that if she had expressed that during the interview, she might not have been hired, because I don't know any employers who have that kind of rapid promotional process. So
I don't either.
she didn't have a reasonable expectation, but it wasn't her fault. Well, it could have been. She had some part of it was her fault. If that's what she was expecting, she should have expressed that. But if she expressed it and they said, oh, sure, sure, sure. And then 6 months, she says, well, where's my promotion? And say, you must be kidding.
She has a leg to stand on that one. But here's the reverse of that. And so I'm glad you shared that side, right? We're looking at it from the employee's point of view. Because I do drink my own Kool-Aid, and I do believe that what I put out there, I should practice, right? I practice what I preach. So as a leader, I'm extremely open. I'm extremely conscious of the generation, the work dynamics, your home life. I put all of these things into consideration when I sit down and work with somebody. So when we talk about having passion, we talk about expectations, we talk about transparency, communication, sharing those expectations. I am one that there isn't a time period in which you need to prove anything to me at all. Let's try. Let's see. So I'm the leader who says, hey, I have a service offering that I want you, because you are my social media person. We'll just pick that service offering. And I want you to help me turn our social media offering into a bigger service. I want to understand best practices. I want to share those best practices. Maybe we'll even brand it and give it a name. I don't know. If we need to create technology, let's create technology. But I would like to give you an opportunity to come back to me and tell me, what do we need to build a good social media service? And you don't. I just gave you the biggest opportunity I think any employer would probably ever give you. You're not here 15 years. You might have only been here 6 months. You might have only been here 3 months. And I even like what you're doing. And I'm so interested in the reception we've gotten from our clients by offering this, that I want to turn this into a department.
You see the benefit to you and the potential benefit to you and your business.
But then they don't do it. And you're like, wow. So the opposite, right? The very opposite. You didn't give me something that I expected you to give me because I think I just deserve it, because this is a lot harder than I thought, or I think I'm worth more, but I didn't articulate that to you. Now, me as a leader articulated exactly what you have to succeed, exactly what I'm going to give you, and you don't succeed. So right there is a real dynamic in the way that we think about how we change. How do we collaborate, right? Do we say, hey, you're right. Run with it. Bring me some opportunities. I would love to see what you're thinking. And you don't.
But some people are not self-starters.
Correct. They don't have that passion, drive, and confidence.
That's going to be a problem.
That's exactly right.
They may want to do what you want them to do. They don't know how to even get started.
And if we take that back just to legal, one of the questions that we had on our list to talk about was, what about the worker? What about the one who just wants to work? Just put their head down and come in and do their work, because that's what they do right. That's what they do really well. And trust me, I value those. I have workers. I have people that want to be in front of clients. I have people who want to be on a stage. That's great. But I don't force everybody into those certain dynamics. But in the law firm, which I find very interesting, and so we go back to creating brands and other things that we talk about, when that individual, usually it is, a senior attorney, but not a head of a practice or not a rainmaker. They're just the doer. And then succession happens and people start to age out. Now, the law firm was driven by those senior rainmakers, those still 68 to 82-year-old attorneys who are still working with their corporate clients who are afraid to pass them off. The logical person to step into that is that doer who has been on that account every single day, who knows that account inside and out. But we have never invested into that doer. That doer's just been a great doer. They come in every day, they bill the hours they need, they work the weekends they want, and they produce good work. But now there's a succession and they're moving. They're going to change. Now you're going to be in front of clients more so. Maybe now you're going to be leading. So these dynamics have changed and we have not focused on this level. So these workers now are being advanced, but yet they have never been a part of leading collaboration, being in a team. Maybe they're just the worker, the work dynamic. And so what I'm realizing is now we have to almost go back and teach an old dog new tricks, right? Because they know the law. They come in and they produce the law. But are they a rainmaker, which now they've been forced into? And it's a very different dynamic for them.
So they don't want to be the leader.
Well,
then you
so
don't make them, you don't force that round peg into that square.
Correct.
Opening.
You don't.
Because you'll lose the client.
That's exactly right. So where that dynamic shift has to go, from my perspective, is not just some movement advancement up. Because if you move somebody up who does not want to be a leader, they're not going to be the leader. That's failure for you. The other is, are we setting back and looking at the greater playing field? And the greater playing field obviously is outside of our boardroom, but into our client's boardroom now. And so from the client's perspective, you still might be 78 years old, but the person on the other side of the table now is 38 years old. And you're not making those adjustments. So here's an opportunity to say, how do we create team leadership that's a different dynamic than what we had before? Now, I'm potentially looking at a 30 to 40-year-old that's going to work in a much better dynamic and a much better way with the CEO of that company because of the generation they're in. So the problem I'm getting at is there's this sense of movement and sometimes there shouldn't be movement, right? Sometimes let the doer be the doer, because that product that you give out, that work product at the end of the day, is done by that doer, and that work product is valued by your client. Why would you want to change that dynamic? They're happy at doing what they do. They're successful at doing what you do. You're successful. Your team is successful. Your client is happy. So the dynamic there isn't how do I work and focus on and change potentially the worker? You don't. You now change the dynamic of team and team leadership so it aligns better so with the client.
But you have to make that senior employee feel valuable. And whatever that is, that would make him feel valuable, whether it would be a bonus or more vacation days or maybe a trip, because he's going to be mentoring that new person. Has the face-to-face with the client. And he needs to feel that you are important. He or she, you are important. We need you and we value you.
You hit on something that I've experienced several times. So I'm looking to help make law firms stay relevant, right? I'm looking to make them attract talented attorneys, especially talented attorneys with a book of business, great revenue growth. I'm looking to help them retain. So therefore, how do we adapt? Well, if you adapt too far, now you're alienating another group. So there's this kind of reverse alienation that can happen. And so you've got these very, very talented, respected attorneys that have been with your firm for years and years and years, built the firm alongside of you, and they're aging out. But all of your discussions and all of your changes and all your dynamics and all of the way that you're starting to handle the new brand, in a way, your adapted brand, starts to alienate them, starts to leave them out. And I've heard many managing partners, many law firm leaders say, hold on, I can't alienate them. I have to continue to show a level of respect to them. But I also hear what you're saying. How do we do both? And I think that still is a challenge for large law firms, for large accounting firms, for large businesses in general that have these multiple generations that they're trying to appease. And what happens is you have to be very careful, because if I turn all of my focus over here, I'm losing my focus here. And that could be just as detrimental as to ignoring one group because you feel maybe you haven't earned your way to another group that you might say, you've aged yourself out. This is exactly a dynamic that we are all dealing with today in business.
Absolutely. But it's about developing both groups.
But it comes back to
along the way.
respect. What you said, that respect, the compromise.
Exactly. But it's not just the respect, it's developing both, developing more junior attorneys so that they can become client contacts and more savvy with talking to clients and establishing the more senior, knowledgeable attorney, making him feel or her feel like they're mentoring that first attorney.
Correct.
And making sure that both feel appreciated and respected and valued. And you have to talk to them to find out what makes them tick, what makes them feel good about what they're doing. And you need to satisfy that need.
And again, going back to what we've been saying about trying to shove a square peg into a round hole, and you hit it. The Industrial Revolution and the way that a lot of large law firms still today operate is one mindset, one expectation. This is how we operate. And we don't sit back and we don't listen and we don't ask. And if you remember in my presentation, I gave a big nod to Ted Lasso because I felt it was a real good case study to how you manage a team in a different way, especially even in a different culture. And one of the clips that I showed, and the main clip I showed, was about being curious as a leader. And I think that's something that we lacked in that industrial revolution philosophy of the way businesses were in the 80s and 90s and into it. But curiosity now has become a key. And for me, it's a key because if I spend time getting to understand somebody, I might find that they have so many other talents that I didn't even know from the day that I met
Absolutely.
them. Not even a talent. They have a passion. And that passion aligns with the passion I have to potentially grow our agency. I didn't know that. I got curious. So I think a lot of this is the idea of asking, which you just said. As a business development coach, and listen. Okay, of course, you can't ask and not listen, right?
At lunch, on the ball field, if it's whatever, people talk.
They sure do.
We have to listen.
Yep.
We have to listen. It's
funny because I'm a gay man and I was working in an agency, and I remember going to breakfast with a very, very high up attorney. And this was a big Washington, D.C. law firm. And we go to breakfast and his assistant's with us. And he was getting curious, but he had also already had some preconceived notions as he was talking to me. And I told him about my 3 young daughters at the time. And his response turned to his assistant and said, "See, I told you he wasn't gay." And I turned and said, "Yes, I am." And from that day, our dynamic was very different. This was an attorney that most people had horrible relations with, uncomfortable, just really hard person to work with. But from that day on, I had him right here in the palm of my hand because he made the slip. But I was very confident in who I was and very comfortable. And I lived myself very open. But I don't also come across probably stereotypical in some ways back then. So it was easier for him not to go down that road.
You don't let people marginalize you.
You don't. So I just, from that day on, said, I'm going to live my life as honestly and open as I can. I'm a proud father of 3 and I'm a proud gay man. And I'm proud to be a CMO of this agency or this law firm. So that changed the dynamic for me. But it wasn't that he was curious to certain things, right? It was a really awkward way that it went about that. So I've made it a purpose to really try to better understand the person, because then the way that I measure them can be measured on the person that I understand. and that dynamic. And what I've learned is I cannot, even in business expectations, force people into those molds, those silos, force them into them. But if I can open up my mindset and allow for that collaboration and innovation to happen in a very different dynamic, and not watch it, I'm watching it from that 10,000 foot perspective, but let it happen. I learn so much more as a leader. So when I'm asking you, a lawyer, or you're asking me how I can help you, say, with business development, my question back to you is, what do you love to do? Well, I'd love to go and network, or I love to write, or I love to share stories. Okay. Business development, a lot like everything else, followed a protocol and a procedure. And we were forcing lawyers into a program that they weren't comfortable with. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a salesman. So I'm being forced to become a salesperson. And I saw that this was a problem because I wasn't being curious enough. I wasn't spending enough time to understand what makes you tick. So instead of forcing you to become a salesperson, what if I help you become a better networker? What if I help you become a better speaker? What if I help you become a better writer? Because that's what you love. I love to speak, but I cannot comfortably walk into a networking party and start a conversation. I'm absolutely petrified to go. My husband doesn't tell me about social events until it's just about time to get dressed and go. So I don't have anxiety over it. And they're friends, and I still will have anxiety over it. So I know what I'm good at. And that's what I gravitate toward. Well, that's what I want others to do.
Self-awareness is important.
That's right.
Everyone's self-awareness is important.
So I have to be more curious. You have to be more self-aware. We have to be more transparent. We have to then collaborate and meet in the middle. All that we have said all comes together exactly where we are today and how we deal with this. There are expectations we have on how my business will succeed. And there are ways that you can fit into that and even change it. And I have to be open to that in order for us to stay relevant. And that's my probably greatest advice is be curious, be open, and be willing to collaborate at a different space and a different level than we've been used to. And that's where I think we are in business today, the dynamics that we're dealing with.
That's excellent advice. And we probably should end on that note because, we could talk for another hour.
I'd love to come back and talk some more because
And I will invite you.
Thank
I
you.
will invite you.
There's so much more to unpack.
There really is, because there has to be a meeting of minds. People have to be willing to accept each other as we come and realize that everyone brings something to the table. Each of us has something to offer. We just have to identify what it is, and we can do that collaboratively. Like I said, I try to create win-win situations, and that's what I'm trying to do with the book. The donors buy the book. I'll donate my time and deliver webinars based on the book, and I'll interview one employee from the donor's company, business, whatever it is, and interview them on the podcast. I mean, the donor gets a write-off, a tax write-off, and gets some exposure.
Yep.
It's a win-win.
It is a win-win. Absolutely.
I try.
That's all we can do is try and be open. And that's exactly, again, how this is going to work. Just be open, collaborate. And for me, it's always just simply be kind. I even had that tattooed onto my finger during COVID because I believe so much in the fact that if I'm going to hand you something and you can look down and see a tattoo on my thumb that reminds you of the importance of being kind. And as leaders, sometimes that's hard. But if you take a deep breath and say, I'm going to go through this in a way that is as kind as I could possibly do it, that's all we can ask.
Well, I think, unfortunately, kindness is foreign to some people. It's unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar to them. So it's not like where they go immediately.
No.
If they've ever been kind, they'd have to go back into the recesses. There just isn't enough kindness in the world. You're absolutely right.
And if they ever experience kindness, that's another question. But here we go down another rabbit hole. So it's probably best we don't.
Absolutely. But thank you so much, Terry. I so appreciate your time and your commitment to getting on the platform. I know it was a challenge, but you powered through.
I
I
sure
knew
did.
you would.
I sure did.
Thank you so much. And please, listeners, continue to listen to Your Employment Matters. We'll have other interviews that will hopefully give you information you can use. And please consider, let me just say it this way. Your GPS to Employment Success is available on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, Business Expert Press, and in independent bookstores, wherever books are sold. Until next time, bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Your Employment Matters with Beverly Williams. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. I truly appreciate your support, and that helps other listeners find the podcast. If you have a comment, question, or suggestion, you can reach me at bawilliams@youremploymentmatters.com. My book, Get the Job Done, is available on Amazon.com and barnesandnoble.com. Please join me again next week. Until then, remember to embrace change and differences.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.